We've got D, she, her from Iowa. Farm animals are bred for food. Morality is more in how they are farmed. Okay. Hello, D. How are you doing?
Hey, D.
Hi there. Hi.
Hello.
Great to talk to you guys.
Likewise.
Hello.
What have you got?
Okay. Well, okay. I grew up in ag country, very rural area. Farming was like the local economy. So while I never farmed myself, I, grew up with farmers. I visited farms, and I think that the future of our agricultural economy needs to lie with the local farmer. We've got to start supporting the local farmers more and more, because these are the more ethical practitioners for raising farm animals. Goodness. Now, I know that modern family farmers still use some, like corporate slaughter, transportation, stuff like that. Some of them that are not in such remote rural areas still use corporate farming methods for those activities. But the farm animals, I keep saying that, I don't know why.
We've all been there. We all do.
You should hear me talk, okay? when the camera's off, I'm just like,
it is true.
Yeah. He's seen me. Yeah.
Okay, I might as well just be. I might just as well be and go and, But the farm animals that we have now are mostly genetic lines that have been established for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Mm-hmm. So they are, they are food animals. That's what they were created to be. I think the morality that we're looking for is in how they are farmed. So
right.
We want to start cutting out those corporate farms. We want to start cutting out, allowing maybe the more rural farmers to go back to, their own butchering. And there are co-ops who have like co-op meat lockers in the rural areas for pork and beef and lamb, mm-hmm. eggs, egg laying chickens. We're seeing more ethical communities come together and make ethical and cruelty-free farming more of a reality now than it. Trending more towards that now than we have in a long time. So I think if we, concentrate on that and try to find ways to fund our local farmers, I think that vegetarianism could still be an ethical option.
Right.
And that's my thought. I've tried a couple of times with a few other people to try to get that thought out and mm-hmm. try to fully form it. What do you guys think?
You said something interesting about how animals have been bred now for this, and I don't see how that can make it any more right. Because they are still animals that have feelings at the end of the day. So I don't see that as a pro for still eating meat and animals, because people bred dogs specifically for fighting. And does that then make it right that they were forced into fighting each other and one coming out the victor because the other one died? We've got to look at how we can maybe move away from we've got a line of animals here that are 1,000 years old, but their grandparents and their grandparents were chopped up and turned into meat. Does that make it right? What about you, Drew?
Yeah, I was going to start making similar comments. I think it's dangerous to say, just because something has been bred to, some would say to provide for food, others would say, and I wouldn't necessarily put it in these words, but some would say to be murdered, right? Just because you're bred to be murdered, to be tortured, doesn't mean it's not painful for them, doesn't mean it's unpleasant for them, and doesn't mean that they don't feel it, right? If one thing we know is that in all of the breeding, which I agree has been done very intentionally, the breeding, one thing that was never included, maybe because there isn't a way to do it, or maybe just because they didn't care, is the breeding process did not include eliminating their ability to feel or sense or hurt, be it physically or even emotionally or communally, right? The community that, if I understand right, the community that pigs feel is it's almost off the scales. Like it's among the highest in the world, from what I understand, among the highest. But so being bred for these purposes doesn't necessarily make it ethical. I do agree, though, at least to some degree, with this idea of exploring ways for more ethical farming. As I mentioned earlier, Dee, I don't know if you heard the caller before you and our full conversation, the three of us, but I shared that I find myself, I experimented with veganism actually for years. And where I'm at now, I'm in more a different space. I'm not totally sure the best way to describe it. I don't know that I'll continue being here forever, but this is where I'm at currently, is this idea of simply being more mindful and grateful for the animals, the other creatures of this world that I am now gaining strength from as they share their inner energy from themselves to me. And then as I eventually die and become food for others in the ground, right? And so kind of looking at it through that type of a lens. So through that lens, I'm not opposed. I eat beef. I eat eggs. I eat just about anything. I'm trying to stay away from white carbs these days. But apart from that, in terms of protein, I kind of eat everything, okay? But I try and do it more mindfully, more intentionally, more gratefully. That said, though, that's where there is a place for that's where there is this place for more sustainable, more ethical farming practices, so that those animals, before they become food, that they can truly enjoy life to some degree. So where it's wide open fields. So I only buy grass-fed beef, okay? Open range, free range eggs from free range chickens, right? So trying to be more ethical. I don't know that I have all the right answers, but right, looking for those who aren't given hormones. So I while you were talking, Dee, I looked up, okay, well, what does ethical farming mean? It's not my area of expertise, I confess, right? So I'm seeing things like, where there's expansive pastures, natural diets, appropriate shelter, right? Grass-fed beef, not corn-fed. By the way, I grew up in an agricultural environment similar to yourself, Dee, in rural Midwestern Minnesota. My dad grew up on a dairy farm, and I remember him helping out at my grandpa's farm. When I was a kid, we always had a cow in the pasture in the back. I didn't live on a farm, but we did have a pasture and a cow, okay? So I grew up in this. I'm sympathetic to it. And I know it can be a really emotionally difficult conversation for a lot of the people I love in the community I grew up in. But I do think there are more ethical ways that we need to explore in how we farm. So I don't know if that's helpful. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on this, Dee.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much exactly my point. Is that we know that there are better ways to farm our food animals and keep them without cruelty, without adverse, pain-free, stress-free farming. And I know it's easy for me to say things like this because we are so far into the corporate farming culture now. But I think, like you say, more ethical ways, grass-fed beef, free-range chickens, cruelty-free veal. Veal, actually cruelty, that's an oxymoron because
Right.
veal is baby lambs, right?
Mhm.
So cutting out
Cows,
out veal, that's one thing that I
Yeah.
am against. But anyway, I would like vegans. I would like militant vegans to stop and consider people who maybe don't have the financial means to eat strictly cruelty-free.
That's the other thing.
It is, yeah,
like
it's
yourself,
tough.
that you have an allergy to soy, and it's so hard to find alternatives without the soy.
Yeah.
I would just like to see the hardcore vegans kind of, get off this everybody has to.
Right. I kind of see where you're coming from, but also
about it.
Just to jump in as well, I do understand it. Like there's ways of talking about these things, and sometimes it can come across as maybe bullying people into doing it a certain way. And I'm kind of with you there, but I do also on the flip side of that see why people do speak up about it, because there needs to be some awareness about all these things. So it kind of sometimes does take someone who is what you'd label as hardcore to really shout out about this and say, look, this is why I feel that this is wrong. Maybe just a conversation about this could maybe just slightly change your mind on it and maybe make you rethink about these things. I think the conversations are very important still. Animals are, I was going to say people too. They're not. Animals are, they have feelings and they, some sort of consciousness as well. So do they deserve to be killed, to be eaten? I don't know. I did see in the chat just a fun little thought experiment we could try. Say the year is 2030 and finally aliens have come down and they take some humans away because they look tasty, and they start a human farm and eventually breed certain humans that have more meat and start farming out humans to the aliens that like to eat them, and saying, here you go, this human, we raised them ethically, we put them in a living room and they had a TV and we made sure they had a good diet, but we killed them so that we could eat them. How would you feel about that happening?
That is a good question.
With all due respect to the person that brought that up, I think that hypotheticals like that aren't helpful in this discussion. Right.
I liked it though. I really enjoyed it, Dee.
I'm glad you did, and I'm glad they put it out there. But for me personally, it has no relevance. And I did want to kind of push back on one thing. I don't think an equivalency with breeding fighting dogs is equivalent to breeding meat animals.
Well,
in my particular argument, I don't believe that it's relevant, because ethical treatment and cruelty-free treatment is baked into my argument for this. So I don't think that breeding fighting dogs is equivalent. Having said that, I am very much against fighting dogs.
Right. I feel like a massive hypocrite here because I still eat certain meats. So I don't want to be because I do feel like animals need to be treated right, but also I like how some animals taste still, and I can't get away from that. But I still think that like animals being bred for a purpose, in this case, it's to be eaten at some point. Does that animal have? Should the animal have a say in being bred just to be killed to be eaten?
Well,
even if it's in an ethical way, they're still the end point is still that they're going to not be around anymore to be food for someone.
But what are we going to do?
Right. Well, and that is a good question. What are we going to do?
No,
if I may,
farm economies.
Yeah.
Farm economies. What I mean, if the hardcore vegans have their way, what are the farmers going to do then? It's going to be a massive disruption to many local economies.
I'd like to jump in with a couple thoughts here on a few different things over the last few minutes here. So I'll just make shoot out a few different responses to a few different things that have been said here that I think might be helpful lenses to look at a few things with.
Okay.
First of all, talking about, the vegans, they need to understand, almost sensing, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it almost feels like the vegans need to shut up, or something like that. Here's one thing I will always be in favor of, and this is just me. Feel free to disagree. One thing I will always be in favor of is when a human, anyone, if you believe something firmly, passionately, with conviction, if you're all in on something, I want to hear it, and I want you to give me your best shot. So I might not, because I think you owe it to us. Because what if it's better? What if your arguments on something I've never considered before, or what if your arguments, and when I'm saying you, I'm not talking about you, D, I'm talking about all of humanity. What if your arguments on something I am against end up convincing me? What if I've never thought about it before? Like I truly believe we have an ethical responsibility to loudly and vigilantly and passionately proclaim whatever it is our viewpoint is. So yes, I might not agree. I don't agree with, at least not the classic stereotypical vegan, at least not them. I don't agree with their framework or whatever they're looking at from certain ways, but I 100% want them to argue their case. I kind of hope they'll allow a little bit of leeway for those of us who agree, but that's a different issue. If they want to be assholes, whoever the particular person is, definitely not all are. But if somebody who's a vegan wants to be an asshole and not allow for any variability from other people, well, that's a different issue. Okay, whatever, be an asshole. But I still want to hear your position on things. Mm-hmm. You owe it to me. And I believe that I owe it to you that you hear mine. So that's one thing I want to state. I do want to, one way, again, it's just four things. That's the first. I want to just shooting out a couple things here in response to, as I've heard Dee and John, the two of you going back and forth in conversation in the past few minutes. As far as the fighting dogs analogy, the way I heard it at least was not that John was equating, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard was not John equating raising animals for food with raising animals to fighting. That's not what I heard. What I believe I heard was the justification in an animal being bred for a particular purpose, making that purpose ethical.
Right.
That is what I think was argued against, and that I 100% believe. Granted, the purpose of breeding a fighting dog is very different than the purpose in raising an animal for food. And one might be ethical and the other one might not. But nonetheless, the correlation of an animal being raised for a purpose, bred for a purpose, makes it automatically ethical is I would suggest is absolutely hands down wrong. Okay, that's my second thing. Third thing, moving on real quick. Aliens. I actually love it. So here's where I see the messiness of humanity, the messiness of life. is I look at it, I'll agree, D. I don't like the equation, and yet I kind of fucking do. Like because it's beautiful. I do think it absolutely 100% applies. I think it 100% is a fantastic thought experiment to this. But here's the thing. Now I'm in a pickle, a proverbial pickle, if you will, because now I have to sit here and I have to say, well, shit. If an alien comes and harvests me and takes me on up, I mean, I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't. That's true. I got to sit with that. I don't know that means that I can't, that means I have to become a vegan or a vegetarian. I don't know that means that. I mean, I don't think, I'm trying to think of like an animal that would get eaten by an elk. I don't know that an elk likes being eaten by a lion. That doesn't mean now that's different. What are some meat eating animals that also get meat eaten? I'm sure there's some out there. I can't think of any at the moment, but I'm sure they don't want to be preyed upon, but yet they still got to eat. I suppose the difficulty, the gray area here is we don't have to eat meat. That is what makes it messy. Welcome to the messiness of the human experience. Yeah. But I do think that it 100% applies. And the last thing I'd say is, what about the farmers? Yes. I grew up, and then I'll shut the fuck up and you want to hear more from each of you. We can continue the conversation. But what about the farmers? Here again, I empathize, I sympathize. I'm from a farming community. I get it. And as humanity advances, as the world continues, there are industries that grow obsolete. I'm not saying that farming will ever grow obsolete. But certainly if we conclude that it's unethical, again, I'm not suggesting that it is unethical, but if we would conclude that it is unethical, then that better not fucking be. We better not let it wag the dog saying, but we need the jobs, so keep doing the unethical thing.
Right.
No, fuck that. That is not how we ethic. That is not how we live if we're living ethical. Again, I don't think all farming is inherently unethical, but we can't let the one drive the other. Okay, we can find other jobs. We can find other things. We have to for survival, but we can't say, what about this industry? Because people are employed there, therefore we have to find a way to justify it, even if it's unethical. No. So I don't know. I don't want to go on and on, but those were a few smatterings I heard in my mind. Ooh, sometimes I hear the voices between the two of you, D and John, as you were kind of going back and forth there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Have you got any closing thoughts there, D?
Excuse me. Gosh, yeah, a lot of them running around.
Yeah.
I am not in any way saying that if the question ever becomes settled of the ethicality of it, is that even a word? I don't know.
It is now.
I like it.
And I would definitely, cool. Call up Webster's for me, guys.
Right.
I love it.
I would absolutely, stop. If I ever became convinced of the unethicality of eating meat or consuming eggs or whatever. I wasn't trying to take it all the way to a logical conclusion. I was just trying to throw out some ideas.
And it's very much warranted. It's like all opinions are valid in this kind of conversation. I think you did the right thing. Absolutely.
And when I say I want people to express their deeply held beliefs or thoughts or perspectives, frameworks, that includes you, D. I'm really glad that you've called and we're having this conversation.
Me too. And I do have fun talking to you guys and pounding out ideas. It's one of my favorite things to do in the world. And I really do. I appreciate all three of you guys' viewpoints. And you did give me a couple of things to think about.